And we are live on Raconteurs News on this Monday. It's the 4th of November, 2019. I don't know where the time goes, but it's certainly buggered off somewhere. We're just trying to do two shows this week. That'll be the first time in ages to do two shows. Tomorrow night we're going to do
I don't know where the time goes.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's certainly buggered off somewhere.
Oh no, man! What's happened here?
You've not left it on studio or something, have you?
The first time.
There we go. Sorry about that. I've got it running as well. You on YouTube, and it's just burst in there. Yeah, sorry about that. What I was saying, we're going to do a phone in tomorrow night. We're going to try and do a phone in. So if you'll be on your best behaviours, if you've got anything to say, then you'll be able to come on and talk to me and Ade and tell us everything that's driving you up the wall. So we're going to start that. We're going to try that tomorrow night. It should be interesting, Ade. What do you think, Ade?
Yeah, it should be good. All I would ask is, please have something to say.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about people who are going to try and come on, because we need people who've got something to say other than, yeah, I can tell you this is working. We know it works.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, it should be a bit of fun. I know there's a few of our listeners that have been on and come on the show with us, and it's never ended up in one of us getting murdered. So we look forward to that, to doing that again, and hopefully in the same vein. So, Ade, we've got a guest tonight, haven't we?
Yeah, just before we get to guest, and there is a nice little link in here. I just want to cover a couple of things.
Okay.
Past couple of weeks, you've heard me ranting about public buildings where they've got a policy because nobody's got any common sense anymore, so they have a policy instead.
Yeah.
And I found out Sheffield Arena, the policy was last week I couldn't go back in the building to have a wee. So I kicked up a big stink, and all I'd literally done was walk out of the door, avoided a crowd that was stood inside the building, and then walked back in the next one, and the guy supposedly wouldn't let me back in. We had a few words, and I went back in anyway, as you can imagine, because I just wanted a wee. But there's a policy, you can't come back in, and apparently it's because of what happened in Manchester, which is why people are not allowed back in a building. So, okay. I don't know if I'm eating humble pie or just giving you the information that I've got. Anyway, another interesting phone call I had this morning. I spoke to Daisy. Some of you might remember we did a mental health special, and at the time, Daisy was incarcerated in what was supposed to be a mental ward, but looked a bit like a prison to me because it got an 18-foot fence and all the doors were locked. And that's probably 2, maybe 3 years ago now. And I spoke to her today. There's more happening with the legal stuff that she's been dealing with, but also she's got a mental health update, both about herself, the system, but also about how old people are treated, because sadly her dad's got Alzheimer's. So she's kind of getting the mental health thing from about 3 or 4 different sides. She's also trying to help a neighbour who herself has been sectioned under the Mental Health Act, not recently, but she has been in the past. And anyway, apparently, for some reason or another, the police had to break into a house, flat, whatever it is, a few weeks ago. And apparently the piece of wood they put at the window was about sort of this big, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 inches, whatever. And this private company called Rapid Secure Limited put in an invoice for 250 quid. And what Daisy's basically asked me to do is say, if anybody else has come across this before, either with this Rapid Secure Limited or another company, if you can get in touch with us here at Raconteurs News, and then when Daisy comes on in a couple of weeks' time, we should be able to put all the info together, because she's got quite a bit of info for that. Anyway, that's that dealt with. I know Daisy's listening, so hello. Should send me a text in a minute. I do happen to know as well that one of Daisy's friends is sat looking at a screen, dead opposite me. Hello, Lou. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you all?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. For those of you that don't know, Louise Castro has been making her voice known for many years about many injustices that have gone on in this world. And one thing that she's stuck with right from the beginning is fracking. But please don't think that that's the only string to her bow, because it definitely isn't. I don't know how many of you listened to it, but a couple of years ago, or maybe at least a year ago, I don't lose track of time, it's my age. Lou did an excellent program with us, all about fracking, but also the legal stuff that went along with it as well. And the other day, Jason said to me, they've banned fracking, haven't they, or something. Now, Jason and I are notoriously bad at watching the news. We just don't do it because it drives us both mental, and I'd end up throwing something very heavy at my TV if I did that. So to fill in all the gaps, give us all the info for the next couple of hours, we've got the fantastic Louise Castro.
Thank you. Before we start on the alleged fracking ban, I'd just like to say something about Daisy and her being sectioned.
Yep.
Because one of the activists that was staying with us on B&Q did a fantastic lock-on. There was two on a beast of a lock-on, which was put down on the Westby Road end of Preston New Road. And she got sectioned for it. Sectioned for protesting. And she battled for months on and off. And I think they arrested her in the hospital, and there must have been about 40 of them. She's a tiny little, beautiful girl, just so lovely. And they assessed her. They said she was fine. She got full capacity, nothing wrong with her. The hospital and the doctors let her go. Then she was rearrested again, and then she was assessed again and let go. And in the end, I think it was on the third or fourth time, they actually sectioned her, and they forcibly gave her really ruthless medication. And she was only released from the hospital under section on the condition that she went for depots. And the last time I saw her, she wasn't in a good place.
She went for depots. In other words, contraception you're talking about.
No, depots, which is the lithium. I think they use the injection, don't they? It's
right,
like
okay. I thought you said depots. Sorry.
Yeah, depot. Depot is it's what they call in the mental health service. It's the injection they give you for weekly or fortnightly for combating your mental health issues that she didn't have. In other words, it was a way of keeping her silenced.
Yep.
So they will get you every way they can if they think you're a danger to the status quo.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. I mean, I saw it at first hand when I was up there for what seemed like months on end, but it was actually weeks on end. It was just short of 4 weeks. When I was up in the mental health unit every day, and it's shocking. It really is. It's just shocking.
It is an absolute state abuse of power.
Yeah.
Without doubt. So, and if you are listening, Daisy, I know it's a while since I've seen you, but love you loads, and we'll get together soon. And I'm sorry about your dad. I'm sorry. That's, hard news.
So, tell us about filling all the gaps in of mine and Jason's ignorance.
So, on a fanfare, the Tory government...
I'll tell you what we could do, Louise. I'll tell you what you could do. Just give us a mega quick recap, kind of what had happened up until sort of a couple of years ago, because you was telling us there was a lot of law involved about how big a site they can have on a piece of land without planning permission and all this sort of stuff, which threw me like you wouldn't believe. And then, but you try to do that a bit quick, just so that people can catch up, and then take us forward to where we. Yeah,
lots happened in the past couple of years. So, the one we were talking about when we were talking about the legalities, we looked at, you see, this law of hydraulic fracturing came in 2015. And there were several parts to it, depending on the size of the compound that you built or the well site, depended on the type of environmental assessment that you had to have. So instead of having a more complex, more expensive environmental impact assessment, if you kept the well site just under the hectare at 0.99, then you only had to have an environmental risk assessment, a lot cheaper, a lot easier to process. And that was just one of the ways they were getting around the regulations. But the biggest impact of all was under David Cameron in 2015 in the Infrastructure Act, when they did several things. They redefined protest to include fracking camps with gypsies and travellers. So we came under their rules and regulations. But they also defined hydraulic fracturing. And they defined hydraulic fracturing in terms of volume of fluid. So anything that was high volume hydraulic fracturing in terms of volume was classed as hydraulic fracturing. Anything below that volume was no longer fracking. And this is it's a huge way round the regulations, because what it means is that if you campaign against that, people can quite genuinely say, well, they're not fracking. And what that rule did was, it meant that something like 42% of all wells that had been drilled in America that were acknowledged as hydraulic fracturing under Cameron's definition was no longer fracking. So it was just another way of getting around the regulations. And currently, it's what they're using at West Newton, because they've gone back into West Newton and drilled a second well. So they're using those same regulations there, and they're now using them on Preston New Road. So the government came out and said, we're banning fracking. And everybody got there. Everybody was arranging parties. I've had emails from Reclaim the Power, 38 Degrees, and various other groups to say, oh, we've won, they've banned fracking. Well, actually, they haven't banned fracking. They haven't even banned high volume hydraulic fracturing, because within a few days, the government have U-turned. So now the government have come out and said that actually we're not banning fracking. It's not even a moratorium like they have in Scotland on fracking. What it is a pause to see if the exploratory and the drilling companies can actually prove that they can do it safely and within, for quadrilla in particular at Preston New Road, within what they've called the traffic light system. And the traffic light system is a system whereby they measure seismic activity. And it was when they went over that seismic activity that caused the earth tremors that residents had never really been active before, never even particularly opposed fracking before, all came out because they felt the tremors and they were affected. So government have done a huge U-turn, and it has been said to be just an electioneering campaign to get people on side, because of course one of the Conservative Lancashire MPs came out and said fracking will destroy our party. So I think this is what they're trying to do, is appease the electorate.
And for the only time for a general election, I think there's one in December, isn't there? I don't actually follow news, but I don't know there is one in December. It's quite good timing, that, isn't it?
Oh, it was perfect timing, because of course Parliament goes into what they call Purdah tomorrow, the 5th of November. So Parliament effectively dissolves. everybody can start campaigning for the election. And during Purdah, that's when these political parties start campaigning. And this is what the whole thing was designed to do. It's just part of a massive Tory campaign.
Yeah, but I mean, Jason and I both guilty. We thought, oh, it's been banned, because all we've heard or seen is a headline. We've even had people sending messages, one of which Jason put up, good work, Louise, won the battle, if not the war. And actually, it's not that at all, is it?
No. And of course, don't forget that Boris Johnson said that fracking would be the most fantastic thing to ever come to this country. So, he's in, and also really interesting is that the woman writing the Tory manifesto worked as PR consultant for Quadrilla. And she also worked as PR for Amazon and Google and other high-tech companies. So basically, you couldn't make the shit up if you tried.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
You really couldn't. So, and Quadrilla are still, even though they've said that fracking is banned, it's still only high-volume hydraulic fracturing using the, pumping the chemicals and the proppant into the well at high pressure to extract the gas. Now, they're no longer doing that. They had huge difficulties, which I can come on to if you want.
Yep.
I don't want to bore everybody. But they're using...
Bore us to death.
Okay. So Quadrilla have had huge problems at Preston New Road. They've been quite well documented. I mean, more problems, I think, than most people realise. They drilled through the artisan well, which we still think is leaking like crazy. And there are reasons that we think that. So that's been a major issue for them, with massive amounts of water on the well site itself. Sometimes they've been tankering off. There's great big huge tankers you get, up to 17 tankers a day taking off surface water. Now that is not rainfall, because it's been calculated. So it can only mean one thing. The artisan well is leaking through the borehole and onto the ground on the well site. Another reason...
Certainly there's got to be a case there that the aquifer, the natural water in the ground, is mixing with their well if it's coming back up the bloody well.
Well, there's that. We don't know if it's coming back up the well. There are things that I will go on to, but one of the reasons we strongly suspect that the artisan well is leaking onto the site itself is that it was built on a lake anyway. There's natural ponds in the area, but we managed to get a water sample from one of the tankers that left the well site, taking away the surface water. And we tested that ourselves. Now, what that showed was that we tested quite a lot of pond water in the area. And what the test showed was the nitrates and nitrites in that water sample from the tanker that was taking away that surface water. I've never seen a result like it. They were absolutely sky high. Now, we also tested the rainwater. So there was rainwater coming down. They tankered it away. We managed to get a sample out of the tanker. But at the same time, we'd been collecting rainwater in a water butt. We tested as a comparison the rainwater we'd collected. And that rainwater was pH neutral. So that's the first thing. Now, the Environment Agency also tested the ponds on the field. So where the well site is on a farm owned by a gentleman called Wensley. We'll keep calling him Weasley.
Has he got ginger hair?
I don't know. I've only met him once, and he was on a sit on lawnmower, and it was really funny. The lawnmower blew up just as I was walking past him. Promise you, it was nothing to do with me. It was just coincidence. So, on his farmland and on bits and pieces of farmland in the surrounding area, that land is injuncted. However, some brave soul has broken the injunction several times and collected samples from the pond. Now, the Environment Agency, when they did a baseline test, they didn't include toluene, but they included benzene from the results that I've seen of the water testing. But what these test results showed from the two ponds closest to the well site that were accessible showed, and these ponds are directly over the horizontal part of the well, of the drill and where the well is. These ponds are over there, and it does show a presence of both benzene and toluene. So without doubt for me, there is well leakage. But one of the problems they've had, apart from anything else, is because well 1 became well 2, and well 2 became well 1, and it got very messy with all the problems that they're having in the well with the hydraulic fracturing and, the usual semantics and cover-ups and everything else. But one of his issues was they operate what they call a TLS, or a traffic light system. So surrounding the well site in different parts, as far as where's Garstang and other places, there are seismic monitors. And you can go on to something called the BGS helicoder pad, and that will give you a rough idea of what's happening. It's really interesting to look at. So that monitors seismic activity. But BGS is paid for by the oil and gas industry. So if there's any seismic activity, quadrillers say things like, or the BGS say things like, oh, well, somebody rode past on a horse, or there was a heavy lorry went past. They will never link it to the actions of the drilling and the fracking.
But then again, if you were paying for that survey yourself, you wouldn't, would you?
Well, of course you wouldn't. Why would you?
I mean, it's like my barber telling me that he thinks he's done a wonderful job. Isn't it really? Or Jason's barber.
Listen, I had a barber for like God knows how long since I've been married, and I've been married 10 years this year. Not needed a barber. Thank you very much.
So they brought in what they call a traffic light system. And what that traffic light system means is if there's any seismic activity recorded over a certain level, and from memory it's 1.5, then they have to stop fracking. So they then have to stop for 18 hours, and then they can start again. So they let the seismicity settle. But the traffic light system was implemented by, it was agreed by Quadrilla and various others. Jim Ratcliffe, I think, was involved. Mike Hill was certainly involved in the setting of the traffic light system. But what Francis Egan has come out and said is the bar on the traffic light system is set really low. And it's nowhere equivalent to dropping a bag of sugar or a melon.
Right.
But that's not quite true. So because they couldn't get enough pressure in the well before the seismic monitors picked up a higher level of seismicity than was permitted in the TLS, they had to stop fracking. Now, because they couldn't use a high enough pressure, they couldn't get enough proppant in either. You know, the little tiny sand and ceramic buckets they use to hold the fissures open to let the gas escape so they can get the gas. And he also has other problems as well down the well, no pun intended. because they use a pre-perforated well casing, which means they don't have to use the perforating gun. But it's a lot cheaper to use. So what happens is, when they put the pipes down and they're pre-perforated. Inside those is like a sleeve that they pull out a certain degree, and the holes are already there. They don't have to use the perf gun to perforate it. But because they're not using a perf gun, it's a lot cheaper, but B, it's a lot more difficult. And you haven't, so you have to frack at a higher pressure to get the same effect, really.
Right.
So because the traffic light system, according to Radcliffe, was set so low, Egan, was set so low, they can't get enough pressure, so they can't get the proppant in. So they have massive problems there. Huge. So what the OGA, the Oil and Gas Authority, have said is that if Quadrilla can prove that fracking is safe, they will let them carry on.
But how did they prove that, though? How would they possibly prove that?
Well, this is going to be difficult because they do want to raise the bar on the traffic light system. They do want to raise the bar on the seismic activity. What they're saying is the Oil and Gas Authority, in the latest report that's caused the pause, they haven't even reported on well 2, I think it is, that caused the recent highest level of seismic activity, and that was 2.9.
Louise, just remind everybody where Preston New Road is.
Okay, it's near Blackpool.
Right.
And it's at a little village called Westby with Plumptons.
The reason I wanted you to say the word Blackpool is because a few years ago, I can remember the thing being on the news about Blackpool and an earthquake and people saying they had the wardrobe doors rattling and all this lot going on.
That's right. That was 2011 at Priest Hall, and that caused the first moratorium on fracking. And that was way before, obviously, the 2015 Infrastructure Act. And interestingly enough, going back to the Infrastructure Act, if you go on the Infrastructure Act, then the Priest Hall fracking operation wouldn't have been classed as fracking. So that's, I think that's a bit of an interesting aside. But yes, you are correct. The other interesting thing is that Quadrilla have said that no properties were damaged during the last fracking that caused this pause, that caused the earth tremors. However,
how do I know that? Have they actually had an engineer's report on every single building in the area?
Now, you'll not believe this, guys. This is unbelievable. So, the earthquakes went off, fracking was paused. It was a 2.9. And then people started reporting damage to property. So Quadrilla sent out some people to have a look. Now, I know somebody's house that was damaged. They now have cracks outside as well as inside the house. The first person they sent round was the, I think he was the T-boy, but he wasn't really. He was the PR.
Yeah.
Young chap, if you like. So
still wet behind the degree.
Yes, that's the one, doing the PR. Then they had a second visit from Quadrilla, which was the PR and the media person. And the media person, believe it or not, is the person that looks after their Twitter and Facebook account. And they went out to inspect the damage on the properties.
Okay, so at which point did either of them become a structural engineer?
Don't know.
Oh, did they just kind of skip that bit then?
I think they skipped that bit. Perhaps they didn't want to do the qualification. So their report said that, so Quadrilla have gone back and said, well, actually, we haven't damaged any properties. Currently, Mark Mills, one of the residents who lives on the A583 near the well site, that had damage to his house from the 3D seismic testing when they illegally trespassed on his land. He took quadrilla to court and won.
Good.
He's now started up, and he's appealing to anybody who has damage in his house to contact him because he wants to get a civil lawsuit going.
Yeah.
But two things with that. So going back to the person I know, they are going to get involved. Also, the Times wants people to contact them who've had damage to their property from the seismic activity from the fracking. So Quadrilla have said, actually, we're not responsible, but guess what? Because you've got a few cracks in your outside and inside your house, we're going to give you £500 as a goodwill gesture, but we accept no responsibility. Now,
500 quid?
I know.
You might get somebody to paint it and decorate it once it's finished for 500 quid.
And then just to get a quantity surveyor to look at the structural damage would cost you £500 plus.
I would think more than that. I would think you're probably looking towards 1,000 quid for a proper structural engineer's report on the whole thing. I mean, they might have to dig out to look. Oh, a lot of money, a lot more than 500 quid.
I know. And when I first started going up to Preston New Road, I did knock on a few doors and talk to people and walk round. And one of the things I said to him, look, before you start fracking, whatever you do, get a quantity surveyor. And I gave them the names of somebody who was from Nottingham, who'd been responsible and involved in quantity surveying for mining towns. And he would have done them a bulk deal. But as far as I'm aware, not one person listened.
Mm.
Now, the reason I knew to do that was because obviously in Holderness, when Rathlin did the seismic testing and there was all that damage, some they paid out for with a gagging clause. Some they said they would pay out and never went back again. Some they said they'd go and visit and never went. And then some they totally ignored. So there was in 2015, the residents who were affected started a multi-million-pound court case to take Rathlin to court for the seismic testing, for the 3D seismic testing. Do you remember I talked about Tony at Whiten and his pond and how the house came out of its foundations, the roof came off and settled down? They can no longer live in there. He has cancer, does Tony. Last time I heard, he was living in a garden shed because their bungalow is not fit to live in. I looked at the damage in that bungalow. You could see daylight where the walls were coming apart. It was unbelievable. And Rathlin said they weren't responsible, even though Caroline Foster, the chief offsite engineer for Rathlin, was stood in that house on the second and third time they set off the explosives for the seismic testing. Now, we think that multi-million-pound court case will never be heard because it is a civil matter and can take up to 25 years to get to court.
Yeah.
So, but we knew from somebody who'd been paid out, or one of the ones that had been paid out, they'd recently moved into their house in Sprautley, and they'd had a full survey done. And the survey showed there was no damage. Rathlin came and did the 3D seismic testing in the fields behind the house. The house was damaged. They had the proof from the survey. So Rathlin had to pay out, even though they paid out on a gagging clause. So that was why we knew from there the experiences that they'd had.
Absolutely crazy, isn't it? Just crazy.
Totally.
So the other one that you mentioned was West Newton.
Yes.
What's going on at West Newton at the moment?
So West Newton, they started drilling the second well at West Newton A. And that went through this time with no breaches to permit. So how they got away with what they did, I don't know, but they did. The other sad thing is, once again, this is the second time, but Rathlin, following their announcement in 2016 of a 32 million loss, they couldn't afford to go ahead, because don't forget, in 2015 we stopped the second well site, West Newton B. We managed to stop that on the archaeological permit, and we stopped it for so long. But then we got word from Historic England and Humber Archaeological Partnership that was supporting us to get the fracking stop under the archaeological permit, because West Newton B is situated on wetlands that are of international historic importance. However, Historic England were told me that due to pressure from above, we had to withdraw our objections. And that pressure from above was the government.
Yeah.
So, but because we'd done so well, they missed their window of opportunity, and then they got into the financial model, thanks to the Angolan government, but that's a whole nother different story. So West Newton B didn't go ahead. In order to drill the second well at West Newton A, which they started bringing things on site in December last year, they had to refinance, and Union Jack Oil went in with them. So, but also now we've been told that they've refinanced again. So they got an injection of £6 million for the second well at West Newton B, and now they've had the go ahead through the refinancing of West Newton B. But we're hoping that it will have to be a whole new planning application. Now, with the election coming up, if Labour get in, Jeremy Corbyn has promised me not only that he will ban fracking. Am I still online? Yeah.
Yep.
Not only will he ban fracking, but I spoke to Corbyn in 2017 about this, and I explained about the Infrastructure Act and how these companies were getting under the radar to drill, to get away with not high volume hydraulic fracturing.
Yeah.
And what Corbyn said to me was, in 2017, was, we know. We have looked into this. It is so, so dangerous. We will stop all unconventional drilling. So, all politicians aren't always renowned for telling the truth, but I have this on recording. Hand on heart, I do believe that if he gets in, he will stop all unconventional drilling, and that is our only hope. And that's the best we have. So,
and who's that? Sorry, I just got cut off for a minute. I got chucked out. So and I don't know what happened. So I've just missed all that. Who's the guy? Who are we talking about?
In 2017, I met with Jeremy Corbyn.
Right.
And explained to him about the Infrastructure Act. Now, Labour have always been against fracking. They've always said they will ban fracking. But my concern with them was they wouldn't just ban fracking. They would just ban fracking, but meanwhile, all these companies would come under the radar and just be below the volume level required to class it as fracking, so they would get away with it. So when I explained all this to Corbyn, he said to me, we know, we have looked into it, and I quote, and I say this, and I have him on record as saying it was videoed. He said, this is so, so dangerous. We will ban all unconventional drilling. And that is the only thing. But meanwhile, we are still campaigning to stop this.
Any ideas? Any ideas what if he gets into power? I mean, everything's just got into a complete tiz. You can't really get any person's view on one particular thing, and the party view is probably something else. I mean, we're in weird political times. But
we are in a very strange time.
But do you think that there is any appetite, shall we say, not among people, but among the political class to and that, I include Jeremy Corbyn in that as well. I mean, is there any real way forward? I know this ban that's going on now is just I think somebody described it as a moratorium, and like
It's
you said,
not a moratorium. It's a pause.
Yeah.
It's a pause. It's not even as good as a moratorium. Scotland is what is a moratorium. It's just they have now changed it from an outright ban to a moratorium to a pause. So, so the question is, do I think Corbyn will do this? Well, I've known Corbyn for quite a while. Corbyn has always been a massive opposition of fracking, huge. But I will also tell you that back in 2007, John MacDonald was a huge supporter of stopping anything like this. He was involved in the climate camps. He's involved in, they also want to stop the expansion of, and have publicly stated, John MacDonald yesterday publicly stated, we will stop the third runway at Heathrow. They're going to stop HS2 because of the environmental impact. And it's under this, they have said they will set an environmental impact bar, which means that the third runway, HS2 and unconventional drilling will not qualify under their environmental permit regulations. So all we can do is, if they do get into power, is hold them to account.
But we can't hold them to account. We're trying to hold these people to account now. And I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's history means that he's just about turned his back on everything. That's, as soon as he's been in a position to be able to do something about it, every position that he's taken is backtracked on, such as Brexit. I mean,
I knew you were going to say the B word.
Well, it was staunchly anti-European, weren't he, back in the day when he were a backbencher? And now he's got to the front bench, and now we're going into a general election where he's promising a second referendum. So that to me means that he doesn't know what, he's got no idea of the real true meaning of democracy is. And I think they're going to end up putting themselves into political toilet again, like they did under Kinnock and such like.
Well, I was more a Michael Foot fan than Kinnock. I have to say, this is difficult, because what you're muddling up is what Corbyn believes and the democracy in the Labour Party. Now, at the manifesto is set by conference. It's not Corbyn's input solely. It is set by conference. And conference voted overwhelmingly to offer the public, under Brexit this is, the environmental thing has passed through manifesto. That's set in stone now. It is in their manifesto.
That doesn't matter, though, does it really? Come on.
Well,
in his last manifesto, he said he'd deliver Brexit, and he's done everything in this parliament to try to stop it and destabilise and to.
No.
And for you to say that, you know, it's a democracy in the Labour Party, surely if they're not going to take notice of the democracy of the people over Brexit, then there is no democratic Labour Party.
Well, Brexit's a tough one, and that's really difficult, because at conference, in this last conference, what they said was, and this is as I understand it, the manifesto has been written by Labour Party members. Ban fracking is top of the list, along with various others. So the important ones will be, for me, the ban fracking, obviously, and the unconventional drilling, the stopping of the third runway, and the HS2 stuff. They, for me, are really important. They're bringing that in on the back of the climate change. Now, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, fossil fuel is a finite resource. And it costs to do it. Now, Solar panels use, as we know, there's still some carbon footprint involved in making them, but it is still better than fracking. Their green energy policy that is also written into the manifesto is, I think, is tremendous. I really do. The new energy jobs. I think one of the other important things going to bring in is the National Bank of Assets, which will be huge. That has also been written in since 2017. And that National Bank of Assets, what it will do is when they renationalise the Royal Mail, the NHS, well, not so much the NHS, because that will be non-private anymore. No, privatisation will be taken out. But the important things for me is that energy, the Royal Mail and utilities will be renationalised again. And that will be funded through the National Bank of Assets. The National Bank of Assets bypasses the Bank of England. Now, the last person who said they would bypass the federal bank was JFK. So it's all been really interesting to watch it going on. But going back to Brexit, so what conference said, as far as I could gather, because I don't attend conference.
I mean, conference is one thing.
Policy, yeah. I just watched the politics of it all. But as I understood it from conference, what they said was they have already, to as far as I'm aware, they've got a deal in place, and that deal is with a customs union and the single market. You will get a vote on the customs union, but we will no longer be involved in the European Parliament. And what that means is that Ireland will no longer have a backstop.
But it never had a backstop anyway.
Oh,
You could go from one to the other, right? You could go. I mean, this backstop, it's an illusion that's been built so that people then go, well, if we ain't got a backstop, I mean, there wasn't one in the first place.
The backstop is that Northern Ireland remains within the EU for trading agreement, whereas Britain doesn't. And then you get into all this tariff difficulty. So going back to Labour and what
I don't get tariff difficulties. I mean, these tariff difficulties can be sorted out. I mean, if we left, for a start, when you're talking about Labour and democracy, I mean, when you look and you see that what Parliament has actually done is it's actually legislated against a democracy. It's legislated against democracy. It's said that we can't leave without a deal. Now, we didn't care about a deal. We don't want a deal. We wanted out. Everybody wanted out. So nobody cares about a deal. But what they've done is now they've legislated so that they can't lose. They've got themselves into this corner, and you can't help but notice that Labour and Corbyn and all the Blairites that are in there, they might not like Corbyn, but they know the way to do it.
That's the issue. It's the Blairites and, of course, the Remainers that are at conference. So as I understand it, and don't shoot the messenger here, because I know Brexit is a huge debating issue. People are falling out. I was watching a programme where this bloke went and said, he sat down in front of Nigel Farage and said, my wife's left me and I blame you. And Farage said, how can you blame me? He said, I wish I'd never bloody blown. He said, all I did was I happened to mention to my wife, who's German, that I voted to leave the EU. They'd been married, I don't know, 30 odd years. She got up and left him and went back to Germany. So it has divided families, you know. So all I'm doing is telling you as I understand it. So
I know, but what you're doing is you're making this point for Corbyn and point for the Labour Party, and
I'm explaining how I see it. All I'm doing is saying that Corbyn promised me that they would ban fracking. Fracking is in the manifesto, and for me, fracking and homelessness and the NHS are the top issues.
Well, all I'll say to you is, please, for your own sanity, please don't be disappointed.
No.
It doesn't happen. It won't.
I know. No. I'm quite prepared for that. I've campaigned for too long and too hard to know that they promise the earth and deliver nothing. So all I can do is pin my hopes on, that something, and they will get in there and they will ban fracking. And that is what he said. So the Brexit thing, the choice will be leave with a deal or remain. And it's a confirmatory vote that was passed at conference. And all I can tell you is what I know of the policies.
That's ridiculous, though, isn't it? Come on, you as a person, as an individual, you know that's ridiculous, don't you? As somebody who advocates democracy and wants to have everything to be fair and not the goalposts moved. I mean, everyone who voted out, the goalposts were just shifted over there. They said, "Oh, you're kicking it wrong way. It's an own goal. We're stopping in now." It's like that. It's just fucking ridiculous. And when it's
don't you think all politics
then put faith into the promises made by these politicians? Then that you know, I just want to say, don't be too disappointed when it doesn't happen.
No, I'm not, and that's why when I'm fully aware, and that's why I watch it all. You know what they do. I campaigned for too long and too hard on all sorts of issues to know that, you know, things change once power, you know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And until we have devolved power at community level, and I'm a great believer in no borders as well. You know, I believe that we should be one nation, but in the whole world with no borders, because I believed if we live in a fair and equal society throughout the world, we wouldn't behave in the way that we do. You know, we wouldn't want to exploit the earth. We wouldn't want to exploit each other.
Well, let's just we'll wrap that up in a little bow, and we'll chuck it away. You know, all that political stuff, and we'll move on to. I wanted to ask you because
can I just say,
yeah,
I ain't got a dog in this fight because I'm an anarchist.
You don't. I know. I am too. But I was just telling you what the man said, that they're aware. That's all.
You want me?
We are fighting all the way. We're still fighting tooth and nail. I'm still writing reports. I'm still lobbying, you know, as best as I can.
What I wanted to ask you before I were interrupted by Ade there, I was going to ask you, because I'm from a time before April of this year, you know, before algorithms just decided that you were seeing one or two different things on your plate. And I remember there used to be a lot of fracking posts.
Yeah.
And I don't see as many these days. In fact, I barely see any. What's the mood like within the anti-fracking community? And are you all united, or are there factions that have been fighting each other?
There is definitely, without a doubt, there is factions. I do believe. I mean, the spy cops stuff has been interesting to watch. How the state has interfered for so long in things like, you know, Stephen Lawrence and various other things, and they have this incredible motto, you know, incredible, unbelievable motto, you know, to do what they do by whatever means necessary. And there's no doubt that the anti-fracking movement has been divided, is splintered. It's become a really nasty place to be. But, you know, you can just ignore that as best as you can and just fight in the only way you can. And for me, I had to withdraw, and I've just sat in my kitchen fighting it in the best way I can by writing and researching and doing tests and also, you know, little things like that. So that's been the way that I've dealt with it. So step back. But the algorithms, you are correct. The algorithms on social media has had a huge impact with things like not just fracking, but any form of protest. Palestine is a huge one.
Yeah,
that's been a biggie. You will notice that you see very little on Palestine, and that's because anything that's set on your timeline that you post on Facebook about Palestine is not elevated and shared out with other people. I read a couple of years ago, Facebook did a really interesting experiment. And what they did was one day they blocked other people seeing your posts that were negative posts. So anything you posted that was positive, any of the adverts, you know, those sponsored postings they do that were positive, appeared in everybody's feed. And what they noticed was that they could control what people were seeing in their feeds and on their timelines. And when they did it on one day, where it was only positive posts, what they noticed was that everybody started posting positively. The next day, they reversed it. So they blocked all positive posts from sharing on people's timelines and feeds and adverts and things, and only let negative ones appear. Then they noticed that everybody was appearing negatively, you know, writing negative stuff on their timeline and on their posts. It actually affected social media users' moods. But what it did was, apart from knowing they could affect your mood and how you think, this is control, absolute control. But what they can also control is what you see in your timelines, and you are correct. You can have 3,000 or 4,000 people. You can share post after post onto groups and pages, and it never appears on people's timelines. You have to actively look for it. And this is Zuckerberg's way of oppressing. And it is done in absolute knowledge of the American government and the British government and governments throughout the world. So social media has become a huge form of social control.
Well, I'm of the opinion that Zuckerberg's just this front man. And actually, what Facebook is, it is basically the government.
Of course
now,
it is.
This is what you are now told to think.
I know, and there was rumours that came out, obviously, that he was related to the Rothschilds, but they've squashed those rumours as well by saying, actually, that's not true. Mm. How much you believe it is, how much you believe it isn't, is entirely up to you. I strongly believe that they are covering up this. I do really seriously believe that. How much you want to get involved in what they would call a conspiracy theory, but I would call a conspiracy fact. And there's no doubt that in controlling social media, if you relate it to fracking, what they do is any posts that promote fracking as a positive, any comments, move higher up the feed. And every time we like or share a post, it makes that more visible. So what they're doing is they're actively making visible the message the state wants to deliver. And without doubt, it is a form of social control. Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing for me as well, if you go on to the social control, is Bitcoin. I mean, I really believe that Bitcoin, we are marching into a one world currency blindfolded. Nobody knew who Satoshi was, you know, and then Zuckerberg wants to bring out his own form of Bitcoin, which they've now said isn't going to work. But 3 years ago, people who understood about Bitcoin were shouting from the rooftops, this is not going to work. So I'm watching that with interest as well. See how they get round this, because obviously they now want to link Bitcoin to the FDA as well. So, you know, financial regulatory authorities and things. So, yeah, the whole world, we're in a state. I think we're on a precipice, and it's which way we tip. I do believe that strongly.
I think we've been on one for quite a while, though. This precipice is taking some tipping over, I'll tell you, because I've been talking and reporting on stuff like this for 10 years.
I know.
And I'm yet to see the end. And every time I see the next prediction of the end, I'm always thinking, well, it's just going to be like last time. And so even if there was an option for us, then we're all of the mindset that there's nothing that we can do, that nothing gets done.
No, I didn't mean a precipice that way or a tipping point. I think that whatever they throw at us, whether it be fracking or Facebook, Bitcoin, or whatever they try and do, when they try and oppress us and they bring in more and more regulation, I mean, and more ways of the state making protest accessible, not acceptable, if you like, they mess up and they do something. And the people who are actively campaigning against these things, we don't stop. We don't give up. And I think that every time they try and quash us, we have to become more and more creative, because I always have said, we're not fighting fracking. We are fighting the state. And we can't give up. You know, we've got to keep going, because if we give up, the state will win without a shadow of a doubt. And the more they try and oppress us, the more creative we become. So I have a great believer that we will win.
I just want to get you to tell us a bit more about this infrastructure, because what I can remember from when you and I were talking before, anything that comes under infrastructure, you now can't protest against.
That is correct. It was in 2004 under Tony Blair's government that they began to class any form of what they saw as political or environmental activism. They classed that as domestic extremism. And it was in 2005, just before the G8 protests up at Glen Eagles, and hands up, I was there, they brought in this they brought in the new law about domestic extremism, so that anybody who is protesting for social justice or for change, that you became a domestic extreme terrorist.
But weren't they only doing that? Because I think I remember that conference, and it was on at the same time as 7/7, and I think that gave a bit of a lift up for what they were trying to bring in at that time. No,
that's really interesting. I know we're diverting away from the fracking. Sorry, guys, but the G8 summit in Glen Eagles, the G8 is obviously the group of 8, the 8 richest nations, and they all met at Glen Eagles. Tony Blair was there. Now, what they did was make poverty history was like the churches, the acceptable face of protest. And they hijacked the real activists up there, because there was thousands of us. And on the 6th of July in 2005, I managed to get, along with 2 friends and 2 randomers that we picked up at the protest camp in Edinburgh, at the Stirling Village. No, it was in Edinburgh. So we picked up 2 protesters. We dropped somebody off and we picked up 2 protesters, and we drove up to a little place near the Glen Eagles. I wanted to say Octorada, but I'm not sure it is. So anyway, we drove there. It could be Octorada. I'm getting old. My memory's going, you know. So we arrived, and they promised us we could march to the fence, and then they said we couldn't, and then we said we could. And that was on the 6th of July. Now, some people managed to get through to the fence, and there's famous scenes where the police are absolutely, they smashed us at Glen Eagles. I've never seen protesters. I've witnessed and had some brutal police. I've witnessed and had against me some horrific police brutality, but nothing like we had at G8. You know, the Chinooks were flying over us, and you could see them. They had their machine guns pointing at us, and you could see the whites of their eyes. It was unbelievable. But some people managed to get through. I was kettled in at the back, And it was just like, I don't know if you've ever seen the film Billy Elliot, and you know where they're standing row upon row of police with the horses and the riot shields, and they kettled in about 50 of us in that way. So we were just standing there. We had to make our own entertainment, you know, swearing at the helicopters and the police and what have you. And I was talking to my friend, and this is, as I live and breathe, this is the gospel truth. So I was talking to my friend Paul, and he said to me, "It's really odd this." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, normally there's some sort of event, you know, where the whole thing distracts away from G8 and it focuses on something else." Now, the Make Poverty History March through Edinburgh, I mean, there was thousands. I think it was over 200,000 people attended that event. And so the 6th of July, we all got through. Well, some of them got through. Some of us didn't, but were kettled in. And then we had to turn around and go back again and nurse the ones that had been beaten badly. And then the 7th of July, the train bombings went off. So, of course, no more protest.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's interesting you should mention that.
I just remember it from time. I just remember G8 and I was thinking earlier on actually about an interview we did with Ole Damigard a couple of years ago, and when we were talking about that, and I think that's just what spurred it into my brain, and just I thought it was used as a diversion away from everything, and because Bono and all that, his crowd were there as well, weren't they? You know, this Make Poverty History thing. I think Bono, Sting, and whoever else.
Bob Geldof, that famous picture of Bob Geldof with his head on Tony Blair's shoulder inside the summit at Glen Eagles. Oh, it was disgusting, absolutely disgusting. But what it did was, it legitimized undercover police surveillance.
Mm.
You know, because for environmentalists, I mean, they'd been infiltrating weird things like the unions. Obviously, Joe Gormley was an infiltrator. The SWP had been infiltrated. Other things, Greenham Common, Aldermaston, all CND massively. Huge problems for CND. So, yeah, all these things had been infiltrated, and this is what they used as their justification. Mm. And, of course, the anti-fracking movement is no different, because it is an environmental movement, and it is against infrastructure. And infrastructure was included later on as, I think it was around 2009, 2010, because of a no dash for gas protest that closed down a power station. They then changed a couple of years after that, or 12 months or so after that. They then brought all energy into infrastructure, which means that anything you protest against that they class as infrastructure, you are a legitimate target. I went and took a photograph of Salt End a couple of years ago. Now, Salt End is owned by Jim Radcliffe, and it is a monstrosity. It previously used to belong to BP, along with Grangemouth. There's a gas pipeline that runs between Grangemouth and Salt End. And Salt End is Europe's largest plastics manufacturer. And I always said that INEOS's involvement in fracking is not to pump shale gas into the national grid. Currently, they're using shale gas tankered over from Pennsylvania into Grangemouth, down the pipeline into Salt End. And I was always convinced that he wanted to cut out the middleman Ratcliffe and just frack in the UK. And that's why he got the pedal licenses, to take advantage of all the subsidies, the millions and millions and millions. I think fracking in this country has so far cost the UK taxpayer 32 million. It's cost trillions in America, but they will always say it's profitable. But that's not true. It's cost us 32 million, and we subsidise companies like BP and Shell to frack in places like Angola and Nigeria. I mean, you remember Shell and the Ogoni tribe when the Nigerian government killed Ken Saro-Wiwa. Shell were complicit, and we're giving them millions and billions in subsidies, not just to frack here, but to frack abroad. And I still think that Jim Radcliffe was using fracking not to pump into the grid, but to generate even more profit from that disgusting plastics factory at Salt End. They flare 24 hours a day. You can see it. Now, I went and photographed it, and the police rang me up and accused me of terrorism just for taking a photograph.
You are a terrorist.
You did ask them to fuck off, I guess.
Words to that effect.
Yeah. How does I'm a member of the public in a public place? I'll do what the fuck I like. Piss off.
Well, by the time I'd finished an hour later on the phone to this copper, I did educate him. Let's put it that way.
Good.
You don't know what to do though, do they? When they say something, because they know that you're right, and they sort of, if they don't know anything about it, then they might ask you what do you mean or something like that. But the other ones that do know what you mean, they all got this like little at this moment you are under arrest. I'm gonna have to arrest you on section fucking 26 of my bullshit act. Do you understand? No. Okay. Well, and says it again and again and again. It's a great way. Anyway, Louise. Right.
The law is a difficult one, and I'll just tell you this. I'm not quite sure what the time is and how much longer we've got, but this is really interesting. So my partner and I did an action with the help of a lot of other people outside the Bellmouth at Preston Road, and we put a tower there, and we lasted a couple of days, and we stopped the energy tank, the fuel tanker going in, and there'd no generators for a couple of days. It was a really sad event. But we went to court and we were found guilty at magistrates' court. They put us into magistrates' court as activists because magistrates are more inclined to give you a guilty charge than a not guilty charge. Anyway, so we've appealed this. So 4 times at Crown Court we've had a date to go. Now we should be in court tomorrow, and we have heard, and we're still waiting to hear back from our solicitor, but we have heard that the case is going to be, as all probability, is going to be adjourned again because the prosecution can't get their expert witnesses to stand against us because of the pause in fracking. So it can work sometimes in your favour. The only thing is we're still waiting for a date to go in court. So, yeah, you can't even get a date in court to fight it.
Do you ultimately? Do you reckon? Oh shit! Sorry, Louise. Do you reckon that this is a war that's you're going to win? You're going to come out on the. You're going to be able to come out on the other side and say, yes, we did this, and it's won and it's done. I know that you. It's just with this ban on fracking, it appears to be one thing, and then when fracking is when it starts again, I doubt there'll be such fanfare and headlines to say that it started again, whereas they were to say that they'd stopped it. I mean, do you see you're winning at this? And probably a stupid question, really, because I don't suppose you'd do it if you didn't think you were going to win.
Well, I don't know. I do quite like to take on battles I have no chance of winning. And I think there's a few people like me, thank goodness, because if we all thought we couldn't win, we wouldn't do it. Of course you think you're going to win. Absolutely, we will win. Because in the end, this is such a dirty, dangerous industry. At West Newton, do you remember they cold vented the gas? The Public Health England or the NHS, whatever you want to call them, because they'd done no baseline tests. We can't prove that the cold venting of that gas made people sick, even though it was reported in The Guardian as front page headline news. Gas site makes people's noxious smells make people sick. You know, even the police were being sick, the dogs were being sick, the horses at the top of the road were ill. The lady who lived nearest to the well site, you know, she's going to be another one we're going to lose, and I'm convinced it's because of that. Of course we have to win, because no matter how many times they say that we're wrong, we know we're right. They will not. The onus of proof is on us. And that's difficult.
That's not the way that it should be, is it, either? That's not the way that it should be.
Absolutely. But, you know, no matter how many times they've said, no matter how many times I've stood up there in front of pro-frackers and the council and the government and Graham Stewart, the obnoxious Tory MP who's called me all sorts of things, you know, no matter how many times these people say that, we know we're right. And when you know you're right and you have the side of right on your side, you can only win. And the only way we can win is if we believe and people are behind it and get on board. And yeah, of course. And they will throw every dirty trick in the book at us to ensure that they win. But they can't win, because not only do we have truth and passion, but it's our right and our justice to protest. And they can do whatever they want, but bloody well, they're not going to take it away from us, you know. So the more they try and oppress us, the more creative we can become, the more we win. Small victories every time will get us there.
I've got this urge to put Labby Sifri on. The higher you build your barriers, away, 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 the taller I'll become.
Yeah, that's true, though, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. It's true about everything in life. Let me just tell everybody, you're listening to Raconteurs News. Our guest is Louise Castro. Myself and Ade are back hopefully doing Monday and Tuesday every week for a while. But we're here. And hello to everyone who's in the chat room as well. There's Richard Kinzet, Ron Malcolm, Gonad Nomad, New Beings in there as well. Good evening to you. Apple Charlotte, I know Leeds is in there, Dave Vine as well. So hello to everybody. I hope you're all having such a good time. We've got about 42 minutes left before we say goodbye. So we've got quite a big chunk. Is there anything else you want to bring up? Any other issues that you're feeling passionate about?
Well, lots of things. Homelessness, all sorts of things. But has anybody got any questions? I think that would be cool if they have. Ade.
Miss, can I ask?
Yeah, of course.
How many sites are actually actively fracking and pumping gas and putting it into the grid now at the moment?
Well, as far as I'm aware, none. However, which farm down the south is it's difficult. You see, the government will say we've been fracking for years. Look at which farm. I mean, it is huge. And there's little pockets of it hidden away. You know? And they'll say, oh, but it's not really fracking. So to my mind, technically none. However, unconventional drilling is a whole different thing. I mean, as you know, they say they're using it out in the North Sea. And one of the reasons they give for fracking on shore is because energy security is the biggest one they always say. I mean, how many times have you heard people say, oh, we need fracking because we need energy security. We're buying our fuel from Russia. Actually, that's a blatant lie. So their PR spin, you can never get to the truth of it. We know that in Holland, Norway have both said they are stopping fracking and gas extraction. Now that could really swing things, because we get a fair chunk of our gas from the North Sea, especially from Norway, which they run down the Langella pipeline into Easington and Dimlington on the coast here. So the coast of Holderness and up has Easington and Dimlington, which is the processing station, then feeds it into the grid. And the Langellard pipeline, when they built it, was the largest pipeline in the world. And it was the first pipeline to pipe offshore gas onshore in the UK. Now, they're closing these places down because Norway and Holland have said they don't want fracking anymore. They're putting a whole stop to unconventional drilling. And I think that is more of a reason than this stupid thing about energy security, which is a lie, because we sell a lot of what we produce back to Europe. And also they come out with, well, we're running out of gas in the North Sea. But what they don't tell you is that it's cheaper, between 10 and 100 times cheaper to drill onshore than it is to drill offshore. And also they'll say, oh, the North Sea's drying up, there's no more gas. That also is a lie. I think it was 2017, they only drilled a couple of exploratory wells in the North Sea, but those exploratory wells they drilled showed that they hit across the biggest seams they'd ever found. So in every way they're lying. What it really comes down to is money. A fiat currency that doesn't exist, that they're just using fracking as a Ponzi scheme. And that's why they want to frack onshore. So it's that simple.
What's the next move for the anti-fracking then? Like, do you wait and see how long this ban lasts? Probably about a week after election or a day after election, knowing these fucking wankers.
Well, we don't know. Currently, we're in what they call PERDA. Well, PERDA starts tomorrow, where they can't do anything during this period of time. The 12th of December, I think, I'm not sure, is the election day.
Right.
Then, obviously, whoever gets in power then has to form a government. And then, we've got, how long off do Parliament have for their Christmas holidays? And then, so you've got all that. So it could last quite a while. The thing that it worries me most about it lasting is that it gives the Oil and Gas Authority time to find a way around the seismic activity and say, oh, well, it's going to be safe from here on in because we've put these new standards in place. And what they really mean is they've circumvented what they've already put in place because they're irrelevant anyway. They've circumvented that and they've got a new excuse to frack. But we're just going to have to wait and see. I would hazard a guess we've probably got a pause until about January. Interestingly enough, I think yesterday or the day before, down at Horse Hill, that they call the Gatwick Gusher, there was a fire there. We don't know if it was on the well or if it was something on the site. From what I read, I suspect it was perhaps something on the site because there was this smell of plastic. So we'll have to wait and see. But we may have for high volume hydraulic fracturing, because Quadrilla is still doing nitrogen uplifts and, all those sorts of things. The acid washes, they get round them every way. It's not as simple as fracking is paused, so it's not going ahead. 2 days before Quadrilla, 29th of October, I think, however long that ago that was ago. Quadrilla put on their Facebook page, we're now found that it's going to be fantastic, high quality gas. Come warm your hands on it. And of course, I'm banned from Quadrilla's Facebook page. So I have to use a different account. So sometimes I forget to go and check. So yeah, they are using in unconventional methods. They're just not calling it fracking. So we have to watch for that as well. Be ever vigilant for that.
What about the people that are demonstrating at the fracking sites, at various fracking sites? Have they noticed anything different? Have they reported that anything different about? Because if they're not going to be if they just stop if they were never going to be fracking again, or at least they'd stop. But have they noticed that it's still going on, or what have they found?
Well, there's been a lot of equipment come off, some gone back on, some come off. It's really difficult to know because they're so secretive. They only tell you little bits, and they only tell you the little bits they think are acceptable for you to know. So there's still a vast amount of the water tankers going in and out, which tends to suggest they still, despite what they say, haven't resolved the issue of the water leaking through the artisan well and onto the site. There are things happening, and they've been flaring. They've been doing things that suggest that, yes, there is some sort of extraction going on, but they're not high volume hydraulically fracturing at the minute. But there is things happening, and it is still a cover-up, no matter what anybody says. The same with Horse Hill, and the same at West Newton, and varying other places as well.
Louise, as you know, Louise, 3 miles that way, we've got Hart Hill, and 3 miles that way, I've got Marsh Lane. What's happening at those two sites at the moment?
Well, as far as I know, because obviously Joe Boyd won the injunction, which was incredible, which meant they couldn't parcel the land to stop you protesting. That was a huge win for the protest movement. As far as I'm aware, the last thing Jim Radcliffe said was, we're not going to frack because the traffic light system bar is set so low, it's not a viable thing to do. So as far as I'm aware, he has pulled out. The biggest thing, and I know you don't want to talk about politics and everything else, but one of the big things as well that we forget is that at Salt End, Radcliffe wants to put in a massive extension. And I ask you, when you finish on here, go and Google Salt End. You will see what a monstrosity it is. It is pumping out pollution 24 hours a day, and they're flaring just offshore from there too. So Radcliffe went to the Tories, particularly Theresa May at that time, and said he wants to build a massive extension to Salt End. He's asked for millions and millions in subsidies to build this extension, with the threat that if he doesn't get his subsidies, he's going to move the whole operation to Europe somewhere, somewhere on, I think he did say Belgium, but he could change his mind if the Belgian people say no. Now, to my mind, take your disgusting Salt End and go and put it wherever you want. But Radcliffe has also moved to Monaco, which tends to suggest that he is going to gradually pull out of the UK, which I can foresee is only a brilliant thing. And let's turn Salt End into something positive instead of that polluting monstrosity that it is. So for the minute, Hart Hill and Marsh Lane are currently safe, but you've just got to keep being vigilant.
Yeah, I know, particularly the group up at Marsh Lane, they were really, really on it. And
oh, absolutely. Yeah, Debs and people, yeah, they were incredible.
Yeah.
They were, and the two Daves, Dave Burley and the other Dave whose name I forget, they were on it, they were all over it because they'd had experience from Danes Hill, which was Dart Energy, of course. So they knew exactly what to do straight away. And believe me, that community built, and they were incredible. So they all power to them, South Yorkshire Frack Free, and they were just amazing people. So yeah, Debbie and all those, what a great, great bunch of people. And of course, they were brilliant when it came to the seismic testing as well, because something kept happening, I don't know what. Every time the company that was doing the seismic testing laid their monitors, they were getting disturbed. So they had difficulties even doing the seismic testing. They would find it I could say they were disturbed is the best way to do it, isn't it? But no, they were fantastic. So yeah, they did an incredible job there. That was a huge community effort. And then of course Joe Boyd's win with the injunction. I mean, he fought the most powerful, the wealthiest man in the UK, probably the most powerful man in the UK, to fight him in court and win. That that was massive people power. That was huge. So you
tell us more about that. Tell us more about that.
So one of the ways they try and stop people protesting is by bringing out injunctions, which is what they brought out at Preston New Road and what Quadrilla did. It's what they tried to bring at West Newton, but we stopped them at West Newton in 2014. And these injunctions, they've got more and more draconian. They've got more and more severe with, they lay out how you can protest. So you can stand on the opposite side of the road and wave a placard, but you can't slow walk, you can't put down lock-ons, you can't lorry surf, when you get on top of the lorries and stop them going in. None of these forms of protest are allowed. You can't block the road because Quadrilla, personally, if I put a lock on in the Bellmouth and now, then you can be done by Quadrilla. And they can fine you up to £50,000 through the civil court. So really, it's another form of domestic extremism. It's an extension, if you like, to the domestic extremism agenda. And these injunctions are massive. They stop you protesting. And, protest is a personal thing. Some people feel happy standing on the side of a road waving a placard. I do. It depends on the situation, It depends. Every situation is different, isn't it? Every protest demands a different thing. You've got to look at it, assess it, and see what you think your protest form should be. Why should the state or Quadrilla or INEOS, through an injunction, tell me how I can protest? Get stuffed. So INEOS brought in an injunction similar to Quadrilla's one, which was the one we'd fought in 2014 and won at West Newton, and various other people have won as well. And so this injunction, Joe Boyd took to the courts and he appealed against the injunction. So the court had given the injunction and he appealed it and he won at High Court. And the judge said, no, you can't. The protesters are right. This violates Articles 10 and 11 of the Human Rights Act, the European Human Rights Act. But it applies to us here for the minute. They are looking to stop and remove us from having Articles 10 and 11, so we will be unable to protest. That is one of the things they will do, the first thing they do. So under domestic extremism and everything else, and through injunctions, they try to dictate how to protest. And Joe Boyd won against Jim Ratcliffe in the High Court, and their injunction was overturned, which meant you could protest however you wanted. So slow walking, lock-ons and truck surfs. The only thing is you will be done by the police for obstruction of the highway, but you won't be slapped with a £50,000 or £100,000 civil lawsuit. So that was cool.
Wow, that's a cracking answer. Yeah, wow. So the other thing that you said that you wanted to talk about was homelessness.
Yeah. It's huge. Currently, there are over 320,000 people living in England without a home to call their own. It's 1 in 200 now have no home to call their own. So it's a massive number. I mean, you must have seen it yourself everywhere you go now. There are people in shop doorways. And of course, these people are being given ASBOs to stop them begging. So it's a massive issue, and they're forced into hostels. The hostels are dreadful places to be. If you've ever been in one or experienced one, some of them, it's safer to be on the street than it is in a hostel. So I don't know what we can do. You've seen the rise of food banks, austerity, and this is a government imposed. I think it's a genocide on the poor. I seriously do. You must have seen yourself. Sorry?
It is a genocide on the poor. The squeeze is going on and on and on and on and on, and it's just more and more and more and more. Now, how do we get out of that? Because I can't see. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn reckons he's going to do all sorts of things when he gets in power, but is that actually going to do anything? Is it? Are we ever going to? Are we destined to live in this unjust world for our entire life, and just to fucking people like us to rage about things that other people don't give a fucking second thought of? Is that what? Being open-minded and knowing what you know, is that like your punishment for it?
I don't know. If I really believed that we couldn't change things, then I might as well just give up. And so might everybody else who believes that. You might as well close down Raconteurs News.
I'm trying to say you get to that point though, don't you? I'm not saying anybody should, but you always get that little thing in your head, just wishing you could go back to sleep. You're always going to get that, because as soon I can't. Just like a child being born today, I can't contemplate. I can't contemplate what they're going to go through from what I've gone through in my life. And so
that is the difficulty, isn't it? You always want the world to be a better place for those that, for my children, and I mean, I haven't got any grandchildren, but my children, it is so difficult. And I do firmly believe that, we have to have hope, because as I said, if we didn't believe we could do it, then we might as well just give up. And giving up is not in our nature. And you guys know this, you battle on week in, week out, trying to bring the truth, the alternative news to people. If you didn't think at the end of this, there's a chink of light coming. I mean, I was looking at some of your podcasts, your YouTubes, your new program. You're having quite a substantial number of hits now. So that's good, because there's people out there getting this message. And if we weren't spreading the message and, people carrying it forward with us, then we would give up. So, of course, I do think things will change. We can't stay how we are. We can't. There has to be an end to this one way or the other. And I think that there's enough of us that we will change this. We will change it. And we won't live in a world where people want to fight and, and the greed and the hatred and,
The thing is, all the people that want to fight, actually, they don't want to fight. What they want to do is they want to force their opinion on you, and if you come back, then they're all what's the word when you I'm offended. But yet they want to fight. Yeah, sorry, it's just a bit of a bee up my arse that I've had for quite a while. Painful. yeah. Listen, I'd take that pain any day over shit that I've been having recent months. We all have to. We've had people on this show. Vinny Deeswood is over in New Zealand, and he's trying to pick people up and tell people what's going on and what's going on over there. So we're all. What I think we do is because of these algorithms, we do lose touch. Because I know there's some people that I've interviewed in the past that I will probably want to interview again in future, who are probably friends of mine on Facebook, but I never see them because, they might be posting some. I just don't ever see anything from them, so it don't break. Sometimes I used to see a post from somebody on Facebook, and I think, oh, wait a minute, so you were good, and so I text them and say it's about time we had you back on Raconteurs News, and then get them on. But we don't do that. We're trying to be dragged apart in every single direction.
And that is the state oppression, isn't it? And this is what social media has become. Have you ever watched the series Black Mirror?
No, I tried to. Crap.
Ah, right. There was one of the episodes there that was based around a future society, and your status in life depended on how many likes you got every day on your social media account. And that's the world we feel that to be hurtling into. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I understand the algorithms are controlling our lives, and the state control the algorithms. Twitter's huge for it. When May discovered in 2017 that actually it was Twitter that probably did it for the Labour Party and got them the votes, what did she do? Spent millions of pounds of taxpayers' money and gave it to a little firm in Scotland who were providing bots to tweet out news for the Conservatives and override everything else. So, yeah, you're right. We are being run by algorithms and bots. But I think that there is enough of us out there that are switched on enough to know how to bypass this, and we will keep pumping out the message, and eventually I think the message gets through.
When I look around now, can you remember the Stallone film, Demolition Man?
Never seen it.
Where they all sort of live above ground, and there's only one fast food outlet. Is it Taco Bell? That's it. There's no others. There's just Taco Bell. and it's all this like a press society, and you can't even say an F word without getting credits knocked off. And
yeah, that's a similar type of thing.
Yeah.
This thing about, all of a sudden these women MPs are getting death threats through Twitter and Facebook, mainly Twitter. And now we've all got to suddenly start being nice to each other. Well, hang on a minute. You were the ones that caused this, but now it's being turned against you. All of a sudden it's our fault. So, yeah, I think the algorithms are huge. But I'd rather have a visit from a friend than 20 friends on Facebook. It's true.
Well, I don't even have a Facebook account.
Well, you're not missing out, I can assure you. And it is true, because we lose ourselves behind a keyboard and a screen, and we forget what it's like to interact on a human level. And we are programmed. We're programmed through, I don't have a TV like you. You do have a TV. I don't even have a TV. I have to get my news through social media or alternative news feeds and channels, and that's how I pick up all I know. And you find that once you switch off that TV and stop listening to the mainstream media, then all of a sudden, you're not controlled by Rupert Murdoch and the BBC anymore. And I think that's massive. Yeah, I do. I think that we need to somehow step away. And I do think our younger generation, more and more, are coming away. They don't read newspapers. They don't watch terrestrial television. They're moving into a whole new generation. So for them, the algorithm control that you keep talking about, Jason, it applies to them. So we have to somehow get around that. And I think that will come too.
I think with the things like Facebook, while ever they were happy that most people were still getting the news from the mainstream media, they were quite happy for sort of Facebook to just kind of exists. Let's farm it for all the information, and it's fine. It'll just evolve into whatever. And then all of a sudden, everybody starts ignoring mainstream media.
Yeah.
And using Facebook as a way of sharing, good information, along with a pile of shite. But
of course,
there's good stuff in there. And then all of a sudden, it's right. Oh, okay, now then, if we can't control them into watching that big box on the wall anymore, and they're going to move to this, now we need to control this.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what they've done.
Exactly. So as we've become more creative, they're still there. But the one thing you have to remember is they're always playing catch up. I was reading something. The Telegraph have been really struggling, or the Tory Graph have been really struggling for quite a long time as newspapers become less and less of importance, and less and less people are buying them. The Tory Graph is really struggling financially. But I've been reading that Steve Bannon, who of course is the driving force behind the Trump campaign, huge friends with Johnson and particularly Nigel Farage, massive friends with Farage. So of course Steve Bannon is trying to put together something to buy the Tory Graph to take it out worldwide in a different format. So these big, well, they're hidden, aren't they? These hidden names that you're thrown about, like these anonymous people, they're the driving forces behind our society. And we have to bypass them somehow. And the only way we can do it is by being more creative. The more we are creative, the more they try and oppress, the more creative we become. So, we have to do that. And you're right. They try and run the algorithms, so we bypass the algorithms. You have to learn how to do the things. And I think we are doing that more and more. I think the younger generation are really beginning to bypass all this and move on to different things. Snapchat, where things, or, they use Telegram or Signal to communicate. Now, some people are mistaken in the belief that, PGP, end-to-end encryption, secures that. Well, that's rubbish, as with WhatsApp and the rest of it. But what it does have is an incredible feature where it self-deletes. So you can set your messages to delete. And things like that are becoming more and more important, I think. So, I think that there are ways around it, and we will keep doing that. So, we have to learn, and we have to keep learning as we're going along. So, but we're always ahead of the game. They're always playing catch-up.
Well,
that's always the trick, though, isn't it?
Sorry?
And that's always the trick. Keep one step ahead of the opposition. Hey, you were going to say something, mate.
Yeah.
No, the only thing I've just sat here thinking that Lou, I've known you long enough to know that if it wasn't fracking, it'd be something else.
Of course.
Because your energy and what you bring to, I don't know, trying to turn the world into a place where that most people would be happier it would be. That is kind of your goal, and fracking is the thing at the minute. If fracking wasn't there, what would be the next on your list?
I don't know. I still go to Palestine. I wasn't able to go this year because of finances. So I still go to Palestine, and that's really close to my heart. But, I've only got a little while longer before I get my pension. I think I've got 18 months left and 19 months and counting. So
you're 90 then? That's the age of pension, isn't it, these days?
No, I've got a little private pension. So
right.
I'm just waiting. I'm just desperately hoping that my pension will be worth something. So who knows? I'm getting on. I'll be 59 next year. So my bones aren't and I haven't got the energy that I used to have, but I'll still keep going as long as I can. But Palestine has always been close to my heart. So, But I think, one step at a time. Palestine and fracking take up the majority of my time. So, and nuclear, of course, is where I really began. The anti-war, the anti-nuclear stuff is where I began. And it was through the anti-nuclear, of course, that I got into the fracking, because of the fear that they will try and put the nuclear waste down the old well sites. So that was really, my stepping block into fracking. And then when I began researching it and realized exactly what was involved in this process, because they buried the nuclear waste down old well sites in America back in the 1960s and then denied it. So that for me was the gateway, if you like, to the fracking and the anti-nuclear stuff, the anti-war, Palestine. That was how I got into fracking. So that will always, I think, that will remain long after fracking has gone. And people forget that.
And how is Ian Crane, our friend Ian Crane? How is he doing these days?
Well, he's switched, as far as I can see. He's still involved in the fracking, but he's moved on to the next big thing, of course, which is 5G.
Right.
And 5G is going to be huge.
Well, no doubt about it, but I just wondered what your thoughts were on 5G. Let's have a little go on 5G. Well, we've got about 9 minutes left. So
okay, 9 minutes on 5G. I think it is absolutely terrible. I think it is awful. And if you take aside things like people have focused in particular on the health side of it all. There's been reports of all sorts of things on the health side and with animals dying, and that's pretty horrific anyway. But for me, the biggest issue with 5G is things like we need to cut down healthy trees because it breaks the signal for the 5G towers. So when in Sheffield, for example, with the tree protesters, you remember all the tree protests that went on in Sheffield, and they cut down all these trees because they said, oh, the roots are lifting up the roads and the pavements. Actually, that was bullshit. To my mind, that was always going to be for the 5G towers, because the signal, they have to have so many towers with an uninterrupted signal. Now, for me, the biggest issue with 5G is the surveillance.
Right, yeah.
Because they can pinpoint where you are within a centimetre. It is the largest mass surveillance program the world has ever seen. And that is what 5G is. It's a mass surveillance program.
So we're all knackered then, aren't we?
Well, no, there are things you can do.
Just on a note, excuse me, that stuff Ade's got me.
Can I just interject for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
I'm just about to import 10 20-foot containers worth of tin hats to sell if anybody's interested in one.
Okay, now the other thing I can suggest is that if you are worried about being tracked and you have a mobile phone and you want to go out without being tracked, but you need to take your phone with you, you can make what they call a Faraday bag. And a Faraday bag will stop your phone being tracked. Taking out the battery, taking out the SIM card doesn't work. Okay, now I know that'll probably surprise you guys, but it doesn't. So you need to make your own homemade Faraday bag. So what you need, and this is a bit like Blue Peter, you remember? But here's what I made.
Yeah. Peter Purvis.
Yeah. So what you need is a couple of pieces of thick card and some tin foil and a bit of sellotape. And what you do is you make... I didn't even know you were going to ask me this question, but here's one I made. Hang on, I've got to get it to the camera. Okay, so this is your first bit of thick card. You make a little envelope and you put your phone in the envelope. Yeah? You wrap that with tin foil. Then you make another one of these, and you put the cardboard, the thick paper around the first paper envelope and the tin foil, and then you put another paper envelope on, then you wrap it in tin foil again, tape it all up, your phone, switch it off because, you waste your battery otherwise, but nothing will get through. And that is a Faraday bag that will stop them tracking you.
And just don't try this at home. Well, yeah, you can try this at home. What was going to say though is, when you got the bag and you started putting the Faraday bag, I put a line in. That's something that shoplifters use, isn't it, to stop these alarms from going off when they leave a shop with something in.
I don't know because I've never really looked into that. But this is
I've never really gone shoplifting. I've seen one of these
things. I've heard people that have used cooler bags and things. How well that works, I don't know. But I know for your phone, it is a 4-stage process. Thick card, then the thick card envelope around your phone, then the tin foil, then the thick card, then the tin foil again. And you create that Faraday bag. You can buy them, but what's the point? Because they're quite expensive and they're not as efficient as the tin foil and the thick paper. And that way, nobody can track you. Or alternative, you can just leave your phone at home and whoever's in your phone thinks you're still at home and of course you're out and about. But, you might need to take your phone for something. So just a handy hint for when you get 5G. And there will be ways of wrenching those towers so that they're no longer operable. But again, you risk that would be classed as criminal damage. Damage to infrastructure could carry quite a serious charge with it. So anybody that is thinking of, because at Glastonbury this year, I know that they put up the 5G towers. Excuse me, and those 5G towers were constantly damaged. So every time they went and repaired them, they were damaged again by people at Glastonbury. But now when they're out in the street, you can have a 5G tower at the top of your road. That will be classed as infrastructure. So if you damage it, again, it comes under that domestic extremism as damage and criminal action against infrastructure. So the state will win, but there are ways around it, as I said.
Well, I mean, these are all bridges that we're going to have to cross at some point. I know the 5G thing's on its way. I'm not big into it. The only 5G stuff I used to see were from what were her name? Logical Annie Logical.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And we had Mark Steele on, and Mark Steele's the biggest charlatan I think I've ever seen. And Ian Crane, I think perhaps I could pop into that as well, but I don't think we've got time to.
We'll be it tonight.
We'll just leave it at that, I think,
I do think that, whilst we're focusing on all the health stuff, which could be seen as, people providing, I hate the term fake news. It reminds me of that fat orange buffoon. But it's for me, it's the surveillance that's huge and the tracking. This is going to be the world's biggest mass surveillance of a population. And that's what we've got to try and stop.
Well, it's just taken me, 7 months, maybe 8 months, to get a replacement electricity meter because the screen wouldn't read on the old one.
Yeah.
That wasn't a smart meter fitted.
They're going to be another problem as well because the government is making it a legal requirement that you have a smart meter. I have fended off like you. I'm with Bulb. Bulb are cool. They're great. I've told them I don't want a smart meter and they haven't hassled me at all. So I'm really happy with Bulb. But no, I know lots of these other companies are forcing smart meters on people. We're going to be ruled by 5G. We're going to have driverless cars. We're going to have drones delivering our shopping. We're going to have smart meters, mobile phone surveillance. So, yeah, it's about state control of our lives, and we've got to fight back. So don't have a smart meter. I agree, it's basic, but it's so important, you know. And if they come knocking on your door saying you've got to have a smart meter, you know, pretend they're a bailiff and hide upstairs and don't answer the door.
No, just pretend you've got Tourette's.
Yeah. Sorry, but how does "fuck off" cunt sound?
And
I'm more a hide away upstairs and pretend they're not there, and then they go away. You know, just sometimes you like a bit of a fight with the bailiffs. It wouldn't be the first fight with the bailiffs I've had, but yeah, I don't mind beating the bailiffs occasionally. That's always a bit of entertainment, isn't it?
It's funny now.
Well,
You know,
we've got
the
to
first
tell-
one I did, you like stand there and you go, this shit really works.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
And then after a while, I just talk to them on the phone now and they just go away now. It's great.
I remember once they came round my house and they sat outside and what they weren't going to do, and they sat outside, and I had a car at that time. That was before I gave up my car. And I waited, and they were sat outside and they were waiting for the tow truck to come to take my car away. And as they sat in the van waiting, I snuck in my car. They didn't even see me get in, and I just drove past and gave them the finger, laughing. You know, sit there all day. I ain't coming back. So I just parked my car somewhere they couldn't find it and walked back again. They'd gone then. So yeah, beat the bailiffs is good, but sometimes it's just as easy to hide away. And yeah, smart meters are the same. You know, if anybody came knocking on my door saying I had to have a smart meter, nobody here, go away. Definitely.
Yeah, so it just took me months just to get a replacement meter. I got one in the end, but they actually said to me, oh, no, they're not available anymore, them. So, wait a minute. They're 33 quid on Amazon.
Or eBay.
Yeah. And he went,
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you know what they want, and we know why they want it.
I think you just got to remember that, you know, the top 500 companies, which includes big pharma, oil, banks, everything at every level. You know, there's about 500 people involved in those 500 companies.
Yeah.
Right. One last question, and then we're going to have to go because it's been 2 hours.
Okay.
It says, question for Louise Castro. Have you heard about shungite re-neutralizing the radiation from 5G, 4G EMFs? I don't know if that means anything to you. It means nothing to me.
No, but we'll look into it now. Definitely.
Okay. Definitely look into that one, New Being. Listen,
and I was just going to say, that might be what New Being wants to ditty in with tomorrow when we do the phone-in show.
Oh, yeah, what a cool idea. Yeah, great. That would be a brilliant start. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we're going to do a phone-in show tomorrow night. So anybody wants to phone in, you will have the chance. I'll show you in the chat room how easy it is. Join us, but I have something to say. If you haven't got us anything to say, we're just going to ditch you. And that's not anything personal. It's just that, you know, we're trying to entertain other people here. And so if you come on just going, oh, what do you think about stuff? Then you know, it's not gonna work.
We're not interested. I know what I think, and Jason knows what he thinks.
Yeah.
What we're interested in is what somebody else thinks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So phone in tomorrow night. For tonight, thanks very much to Louise Castro joining us, talking all sorts of things, not just fracking, but also 5G. And we went into various different surveillance in social surveillance and all this crap that's coming our way. But you can still listen to Raconteurs News every single week from now on. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything's good. I'm on some good painkillers now, and I'm not dying now, and I'm able to do stuff. So thanks from me, Jason, from Ade.
Thank you. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you guys so much for asking me. It's great as always. Love you two so much. Take care.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll see you all tomorrow, everybody. Bye.
See you later.
See you later. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.